Liverpool in northwest England, and it's New Year's Eve 2017. The city's main arena is hosting a huge event. At around 4:30 p.m., Sue Wright drove into the venue's already packed multi-story car park as disaster struck.
We looked to the right, and there was a row of cars parked, and behind that row of cars was a car on fire. And then everybody in front of us had stopped, and everyone panicked, and they just abandoned their cars and started running to the exit. The noise was quite intense. There was lots of bangs and pops of explosions. You could smell the smoke. People were coughing. Within a few minutes, I think within about 7 or 8 minutes, the fire brigade arrived.
Local reporter Jenny Kirkham was near the scene and could sense a breaking story.
I was heading out to another job, and I thought I'll swing by and have a look and see if, what's going on. From then, you could see smoke coming out of the different floors. It was mostly on the 3rd floor, and then it spread. You could hear the pops of the fuel tanks in the different cars and things like that, but it was mainly contained and it looked like it was under control.
But inside, the fire was raging out of control.
Around 7, 8 o'clock, black smoke just filled all of this. Everybody was being pushed back because the smoke was getting so thick and it was spreading. And then from then, the massive flames just started bursting out of the car park.
As the inferno spread, the event was canceled. Around 4,000 people fled as the area was evacuated. Drivers were forced to abandon their cars, while residents in nearby apartments were also told to leave their homes.
It was quite frightening when that kicked off. It very quickly got serious here. What started off as pops of fuel tanks was turned into full-blown explosions. It was maybe 3 or 4 going at a time.
Hundreds of cars were now on fire inside the 10-year-old building. 85 firefighters battled through the night to extinguish the raging inferno.
It's not surprising because there were over 1,000 cars.
Although the blaze started in one SUV with a modified fuel system, more than 1,300 vehicles were destroyed. But amazingly, no one was seriously hurt. One fundamental problem may be the design of multi-story car parks, as fire engineering specialist Fatih Tarada explains.
We still, unfortunately, have the situation where a fire in a car park can be tantamount to the perfect oven. The flame from a burning car actually goes up to the ceiling, which is quite low, it's around 2.2 meters, and then starts to move horizontally. So the neighboring vehicles might have it from both directions, both from above and from below. So therefore, you can have an extremely dangerous situation.
In the mid-20th century, as more cars poured onto the roads, city center car parks grew upwards instead of out. These multi-level constructions could pack in more vehicles, but the combination of low ceilings, good airflow, and sheer number of cars risked turning a single car fire into a raging inferno. Although the Liverpool car park was only 10 years old, like all car parks in the UK, its regulations are based on vehicles from the 1960s. Cars have got much bigger, but the car parks haven't. Planning expert Russell Simmons explains why design regulations need to move with the times.
So the fire risk within buildings has certainly changed, along with the design changes associated with motor vehicles themselves. And the research that was undertaken most recently, which was several years ago now by the Building Research Establishment, was done utilising cars from years ago. And since that design change has taken place in cars, we must take that into consideration in the design of car parks. The risk has completely changed.
Car parks haven't really changed. The spaces are still the same size. You've got cars, SUVs, in closer proximity to each other. So the problem is, if you have a fire, you've got the fire closer to another flammable object, and that's going to cause a real problem.
With bigger cars, you get bigger fuel tanks and more fuel.
With the Liverpool car park packed with more than 1,300 vehicles, There was a huge amount of fuel just waiting to burn. But it's not just about the size of the cars or the car park. There's another issue with modern fuel tank design.
Another reason why cars are becoming more combustible these days is because their fuel tanks are now made from plastic themselves. So if you do have a fire from a neighboring vehicle affecting another vehicle, then if the fuel tank melts, it can release the fuel, and that in itself can become a hazard and can burn readily.
Car parks were constructed with petrol vehicles in mind, but since the 60s, there's been an explosion in the number of diesel cars on the road, which is likely to have made the situation even worse.
If you release diesel, it's more likely to pool, it's more likely to collect, rather than simply evaporate and dissipate. So it's more likely to flow into other areas that can catch fire.
Per litre, diesel has got around 10% more energy than petrol, which means it's going to burn for longer. It's also gloopier, so it sticks to things. So if you imagine it's burning, you're going to get burning fuel stuck to something. That's going to cause a real problem when you've got a fire.
Just a small amount of diesel can burn around 1,000 degrees Celsius, and that's around 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's no wonder the car park was an absolute inferno.
In this fire, what happened, as I understand it, is that the first tank will have blown, that will have then cascaded the fuel down to the next car, gone to the rubbers of the tyres, that car will have gone, and then it was a domino effect.
You can see how this spiraled out of control. You've got a slope in the car park, so all of a sudden you've got this burning diesel and it's able to move around all over the car park.
So, a combination of sloping access to each level, 5-decade-old design regulations, and a growing number of diesel cars all turned this city's celebrations into a flaming fiasco.
You can't change how every car is built or knock down every car park and start again.
One simple solution could be to install sprinklers, as is the norm in tunnels in the UK.
In tunnels, fire safety is heavily regulated, but in the UK, in car parks, there's almost no fire safety regulation.
As ridiculous as it may seem, it's not mandatory to have sprinklers in car parks.
Traditionally, there aren't many systems installed in car parks, and it's very rare to actually find a sprinkler system installed in an above-ground multi-storey car park. It's much more common underground, but there's no specific requirement for a sprinkler system to be installed in any car park.
Fatih Tirada demonstrates how effective a sprinkler system can be.
What we're going to do now is we're going to have a suppressed pan fire. So we will be using a fire extinguisher, and the fire will be contained within this metal gauze frame.
With burning fuel, the spray has to be foam, not water.
You can't put water on burning fuel. Fuel, oil, petrol, diesel just floats on water, so it's just going to spread everywhere. The key is to pour on foam. That starves the fire of oxygen and it's going to extinguish it.
This is what we might have had if we'd had a sprinkler system in the car park.
Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service said a sprinkler system would have given crews a better chance of stopping the fire, while the mayor of Liverpool believes lessons need to be learned for the future.
Despite the raging fire, the car park did actually stay standing, and thankfully nobody got seriously hurt.
Had that car not been in there, that fire wouldn't have broke out and those cars wouldn't have been destroyed. So the car park did perform its function, but I think there is questions to be asked about car park safety and what we could do to stop this happening in the future.